Hey Mark, I thought it would make sense to just show you the map and describe it as we go through it. Instead of having to type it all out, it's a lot easier if you can actually see what I'm talking about. Alright, so let's scroll up here. Let me refresh the names so you can see them. So this is where you begin in the Great Seal. You see there's a bunch of orc kingdoms around. There's not too much lore there. The orcs have been plaguing this kingdom for years. Decades and centuries. Moving over, Order of Twilight again, nothing lore specific there. It's mostly for gameplay reasons. It's where the necromancers are, to allow you to go down that path, that strategy if you'd like. These are the more interesting areas. You see the Kingdom of New Caledon and the Golden Republic of Toln in the east. That over there is meant to represent the historic, ancient continent to the east where the invaders came from. So Toln itself is an interesting power. It's ruled by the guilds, so all of its political influence is done through guilds, and mostly they want to keep the peace. They want to maintain their trading hegemony. So they're seen as somewhat neutral, but they're also somewhat loathed by the Westerners, including the colonizing powers. Now, our interesting people are here. So that was, again, scrolls, we can see the names. Here's the Kingdom of Silaria. Up there, this is the Kingdom of New Caledon. So New Caledon was the first of the invading kingdoms. It came in and took all of this land you see here from the Silarians. And it's essentially been a source of tension for centuries between the two. So the Silarians, which make up one ethnic group, and then Caledonians, which make up another ethnic group over here. Between the two, that's the biggest tension in the game. But the Caledonians split up very recently. So the Caledonians were a slave state, slaves being traded throughout this region and also by the Golden Republic, although it's generally frowned upon by the Silarians, even though they use a feudal system. But anyway, so Aventura is the Aventuran Free State that broke off from Caledon after its civil war that split it into the much smaller Kingdom of New Caledon and now the gigantic Ardent Protectorate, which is run by a dictator. You can see a few other powers in the south, but those are dynamically added. So it's the main thing is Arden, New Caledon, and the Kingdom of Silaria. Those are the military powerhouses of the region. Aventura as the Free State often falls very quickly if someone's playing militarily, but its culture is very interesting as well because it spawns heroes and attracts heroes. So if Aventura lasts, people will come rally to its defense. I actually think you were the person that commented that you hate the name Aventura, and as I said, it's from a D&D campaign from many years ago, so it's staying. Let's move over to the west a bit. So like I said, that's the lore-heavy part. These guys over here are interesting. These are a bunch of different tribal powers. What's interesting about the tribal powers is that there's a grand campaign to unify them. And if that happens by the heroes, it's devastating for you. If, on the other hand, you can unify them behind one of your people or drive them apart and they're killing each other, it's much better for you. The Fists of Eris have a connection with ancient powers, but nothing really super lore specific. It's mostly development during the game. As far as background, there's not too much going on. Travelers Cathardi, there's some interesting lore there. You have a loyalist faction of an ancient culture in the Great Seal, and they're actually related to them. The Travelers are sort of the pacifist branch of that. We obviously stole that from some common fantasy tropes. But there's plots where you can unite them and bring them back if you want to work with something like that. But I think the biggest angle is really, this is the tension here. This whole section of the map is these invaders and the Silarians that want to take their land back. You can see that this lush farmland and these mineral lands have all been taken by Arden, making Arden the strongest power by far. And it's definitely a bone that the Silarians have to pick. Whenever the Silarians face a resource shortfall, which they face fairly often and you propel them towards it, their first instinct is always, we wish we had our land back. So it's easy to provoke them into those wars. New Caledon wants to retake its land, so it wants to take Aventura back, it wants Arden back, and it also still hates Silaria, though not nearly as much as the others do. The Vasilian Enclave is somewhat interesting. The Vasilians are an empire that's off the map. The Enclave can call in support from the empire if it needs to. It also has a cult, a cabal rather, of very powerful wizards. We don't have too much lore. It's mostly an off-map mysterious threat. If you bring in the Imperial forces, or if they do, it can be devastating. Massive amounts of troops landing. It is, though, somewhat rare. It does not come up in many games. So that's that. Toln, as we said, merchant and guild-driven, wants to maintain status quo. Caledon, ancient kingdom of, let's say, mercenaries, and we represent them as more modern forces. whereas the Silurians are instead driven by honor. They're the feudal kingdom made up of barons. So this is really an overview of the North Burns. Oh, this is interesting. The last guard is a point that holds off the orcs very hard to take. It's also one of the places for the campaigns where the dwarves come back. If they come back there, they rebuild the fort, and it essentially becomes impossible for your forces to move past. There's other points that have lore behind them. They call this Heroes Fall, which is where they originally stopped the invading forces many centuries ago. Things pivot around that point, so if it's taken, it's not very strategic considering there's other ways to get there, but it's very important culturally to both powers, so both of them will fight over it, and it's nothing you can lead them towards. So really go any direction you want with this. We have a very short description of it that I can send you. It's not meant to be finalized. It was something we just typed out to have something in the description field. Anything you want to contribute to the lore of this world would be hugely appreciated. We really respect your writing talents, and the fact that you want to contribute is just amazing. Alright, so I'm going to end this video now.